first, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. I want to first apologize for I was late with the list of verses that we were going to discuss tonight, and I didn't post everything. So part of it is that I'm never ready for my first classes. So I'm always doing things last minute. So that's why.
Okay.
So the last time we discussed belief in Allah. So we will continue with the belief system in Islam, in the Qur'an. And tonight we will talk about, and there's so much to talk about, as we said before, the whole Qur'an is about belief. And so we have to be very selective about which verses to discuss. But every page on the Qur'an is about belief in Allah and belief in the other things that we are required to believe in. So tonight we will talk about, in general, al-ghaib, the concept of al-ghaib, believe in things that are hidden from us, things beyond our perception. We'll talk about believe in the Day of Judgment, which has a number of terms used in the Qur'an to refer to that. And then we'll talk about among the hidden beings, specifically we are required to believe in the angels, and then we also are required to believe in the apostles, so the prophets and messengers of Allah, and plus the message that they received from Allah, whether those were preserved or not. And then there's the last one, which is the most controversial one and the most misunderstood one, and most likely we won't get to that one. And that's the concept of predestination or fate. Al-Qada wal-Qadr, as the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, al-Hadith khayri wa sharri. So, starting with the belief in a hidden world, hidden from us, but as existing as we are existing. And it's very unfortunate in today's dominant culture. Belief is limited to things that we can perceive. But the Qur'an emphasizes this concept of al-ghaib. And so in the second chapter of the Qur'an, Surah Al-Baqarah, the beginning verses of that long chapter, the longest chapter in the Qur'an, Alif Lam Mim Dhalika al-Kitabu la rayba fihi hudan lil-muttaqin alladhina yu'minuna bil-ghaybi wa yuqimuna as-salata wa mimma razaqnahum yunfiqun. And so Allah starts this long chapter, this divine book, let there be no doubt about it. It's meant to be a guidance for all those who are conscious of Allah. This concept of taqwa, we will talk about it inshallah down the road. But al-muttaqeen are those who are conscious of Allah, and the book was sent as a guidance to those who want to be conscious of Allah. And one of the qualities of those who are conscious of Allah is that who believe in the existence of that which is beyond the reach of human perception. Those who believe that there are hidden things out there that we cannot perceive, but they exist as much as we exist. And other qualities follow of those who are conscious of Allah. They are constant in prayer, they keep up with their prayers, with their salah, and they spend on others out of what Allah has provided for them. So those are the qualities. One of the first qualities of those who are conscious of Allah is that they believe that there's something out there beyond our perception. And among those things that are beyond our perception is Allah Himself. And so that's why in the Qur'an, in Surah Al-Anbiya, I didn't include this verse in what I sent by email. Al-Anbiya is chapter 21, verse 49. Among the qualities of the believers, of those who are conscious of Allah, who strive to be conscious of Allah, الَّذِينَ يَخْشَوْنَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَيْبِ وَهُمْ مِنَ السَّاعَةِ مُشْفِقُونَ. So it adds two belief concepts in this one single verse. Of the qualities of those who are conscious of Allah those who stand in awe of their Lord, they stand in awe of their Lord, although He is beyond the reach of human perception, and who tremble at the thought of the last hour. We will see one of the beliefs that we have in the Qur'an, that the Qur'an emphasizes strongly, is the last hour, what's called the last hour, the end of the world, where everybody is going to be judged according to their deeds. This verse, الَّذِينَ يَخْشَوْنَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَيْبِ, that we are required to be in awe of Allah although He is beyond the reach of our perception. Meaning that we, what the Arabic conveys, الَّذِينَ يَخْشَوْنَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَيْبِ, that although He is not, we don't see Him, we don't, other than through the prophets, we don't know, except what the prophets told us, what the Qur'an tells us. But at the same time, He exists and we believe in His existence. And there are at least 4 other verses that use the same construction, bil-ghayb, that you're doing things although it's beyond your perception. You fear Allah, you are conscious of Allah, although He is beyond your perception. And of course, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, one of the highest levels of belief, one of the highest levels that we strive for is al-ihsan, what the Prophet calls al-ihsan, or piety, or it's one of the highest levels you could attain. And that's to worship Allah, and ta'bud Allah ka'annaka tarah, to worship Allah as if you see Him. So you develop Allah's being conscious of Allah to the extent you worship Him as if you see Him. And that's an amazing quality that very few people can attain, is that you are so conscious of Him that you feel His presence. And I don't want this to be misconstrued, because there are all kinds of sects that talk about the presence of Allah, and so that's not what I mean. What I mean is that you could build up your consciousness of Allah the same way that when we are with others. That's why one of the early hadith that I memorized, I remember as a child, was the Prophet saying, alayhi salatu wasalam, al-mar'u ala dini khalili falyanzur ahadukum man yukhalil. I remember, I don't remember the teacher, but making sure that we memorize that hadith. Al-mar'u ala dini khalilihi falyanzur ahadukum man yukhalil. That your conduct or your way of life, the way you conduct yourself, a lot of times will come from people you associate with, your close friends. So he says, be careful who you make close friends with. So with people, when somebody's with you, like a close friend who's good, who is conscious of Allah, it's very unlikely that you would do something bad. You keep an eye on one another. Imagine if if you're conscious of Allah to the extent where you feel His presence, then there's no way you're going to do anything bad, because with a human being with you, you're not going to do anything. You know, if we're people who come to the masjid, for example, if we're together with any of you who come to the masjid, there's no way I would do something bad. And it's the presence, and that consciousness of the presence. So that's what the Prophet ﷺ taught us, to strive to be so conscious of Allah that we worship Him as if we see Him. So that's and that's why it's so important to understand this concept of al-ghayb. And unfortunately, in the dominant cultures that we live in today, the dominant civilizations, they limit existence to whatever they can perceive, or they can theorize about, or what they can prove and show in a lab. So, and that's, according to my understanding of the Qur'an, that's extreme arrogance, to limit existence to our flimsy perceptions, to say only things that we perceive exist, nothing else is beyond that. I think that's one of the most arrogant things. In another verse, the Prophet in the Quran says, "In fi sudurihim illa kibrun ma hum bibalighi." Although it refers to something else, but those who deny the truth, it's because of arrogance that they really don't have. It's an arrogance that they cannot attain. It's made up arrogance. They're not there. but they assume that arrogance that they cannot attain. So that's that's what al-ghayb is. And again, it's one of the first things that the Quran mentions after Surah Al-Fatiha. It's al-ghayb, the second surah in the Quran. And there are all kinds of beings that out there beyond us. So Allah is beyond us, it's beyond our perception. That's why these verses repeat that we still are in awe of Allah, despite the fact that He is out there hidden from us. But there are also, among the things that are hidden from us that the Quran tells us about, are the angels and the jinn. And so we will, the jinn is mentioned in the Quran, but it's not, we're not told that one of the things that we have to believe in, although we believe in everything that the Quran says, but it doesn't say that one of the things we have to believe in is jinn, but one of the things that we have to believe in are the angels, and we'll talk about it in a few minutes. The next important belief in Islam, and it's so important that it's everywhere in the Quran, is the belief in the last hour, and we already referred to. And it has a number of, the Quran uses a number of terminologies to refer to it. One of them is as-sa'ah. As-sa'ah, the hour, the last hour. This is mentioned 35 times in 23 surahs. 35 times in 23 surahs, as-sa'ah, the hour. Among them is Surah Al-Taha, chapter 20, verse 15 to 16. And this verse, it's one of the amazing verses because Surah Al-Taha, this passage, verses 15 to 16, is when Allah is speaking to Musa, the first time that Allah has spoken to Musa alayhi salatu salam, Moses. And it was when He gives him this mission. But before He gives him the mission of freeing the children of Israel from bondage in Egypt, before He entrusts him with that mission, He tells him these things. Among them, we will talk about that maybe one other day, but I want to mention only one of them, and that is the hour. He mentions to him, and He mentions in a way, and it's in Surah Al-Taha, the beginning of Surah Al-Taha, Surah number 20, close to the beginning. He says, إِنَّ السَّاعَةَ آتِيَةٌ أَكَادُ أُخْفِيهَا لِتُجْزَى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا تَسْعَى. Behold, although I have willed to keep it hidden, the last hour is bound to come, so that every human being may be recompensed in accordance with what he or she strove for in life. And then, فَلَا يَصُدَّنَّكَ عَنْهَا مَنْ لَا يُؤْمِنُ بِهَا وَاتَّبَعَ هَوَاهُ فَتَرْدَى. فَلَا يَصُدَّنَّكَ عَنْهَا مَنْ لَا يُؤْمِنُ بِهَا وَاتَّبَعَ هَوَاهُ فَتَرْدَى. And so hence, let not anyone who does not believe in its coming and follows but his own desires divert you from believing it. Because if you do that, you're going to perish. That will be your perdition. If you allow somebody who doesn't believe in it, and that person who doesn't believe it, it's not because they have proof out there, or they scientifically can show you that it doesn't exist. The only reason they don't believe it is because they follow their desires. That's the only evidence they have. And so in that moment, historical moment of the only time, the first time that Allah directly spoke to a human being through some kind of a medium, which we really don't understand how it happened, but Allah chose to mention this to Musa before. After this, He says, He teaches him the magic that he was going to work, and then He said, اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى. That was the command. Go to Pharaoh, because he had transgressed, so call him to the truth. But before He entrusts him with that mission, what does He tell him? He tells him about the coming hour, and that there are people out there who don't believe in it, and they're going to strive, they're going to do their best to to distract you, to divert you. They will do everything possible to divert you from belief in it. And in this culture, and in the dominant cultures of both the West and the East, there's absolutely nothing. You could live all day, 30 years in this country, or in China, or in some of those Eastern countries, or in Japan, and there will be nothing to remind you that there's someday this world is going to come to an end, and you're going to be held accountable. So that's why it's so important, part of the Islamic beliefs. So it's not only is it called the as-sa'a, the hour, it's also called Yawm al-Qiyamah, Yawm al-Akhir. Yawm al-Akhirah, Yawm al-Akhir, Yawm al-Akhir. That one is, appears in 200 times in 60 surahs. 200 times. And then you have Yawm al-Qiyamah, 70 times in 30 surahs. All of those concepts relate to one another. One is the last hour, the other one is the last day, or Yawm al-Qiyamah, the day of reckoning, when we will all be held accountable for our deeds. So an example of that, and it looks like I forgot to note the chapter number and verse number. This is in Surah Al-Anbiya. What's Surah Al-Anbiya number? What's Surah Al-Anbiya? Muhammad?
Yes,
ونضع الموازين القسط ليوم القيامة فلا تظلم نفس شيئا وإن كان مثقال حبة من خردل أتينا بها وكفى بنا حاسبين. It says that we shall set up just balance scales, scales that are fair on Resurrection Day. Yawm al-Qiyamah is Resurrection Day, or the Day of Reckoning.